if you look at the performance of the shilling, Abby, it will take us a lot of time for us to see shilling trading at the levels of 90, the levels we were seeing some times back. Because if you look at, there are several things that you have to put together. One, we have to work on our import-export structure. We continue importing a lot of things, especially the infrastructural inputs, especially from the Chinese economy. And again, we continue seeing the tourism still struggling in terms of regaining the original position at their foreign exchange earner. So if you put up all this together, it still points to a weaker shilling. Look at even our current account deficit, it still needs a lot more work to be done. So there are a lot more structural issues that we have to address for us to see shilling strengthening and again going back to the below 100 levels that we were used to.
Interesting. And before I let you go, Maurice, we did see fuel prices have also dropped. What does this mean moving forward for the economy, really?
For oil importing economies, Abby, this is good news to them, because if you look at the trend in the global environment in terms of oil prices continue coming down, and this one has been mainly as a result of a supply from the oil producing country. They met sometimes last year around 16th of December, and the conclusion that they came up with was that they are not going to cut oil production. And again, you look at the problems going on in China, especially with their manufacturing sector, which was one of the most consumers of oil in terms of manufacturing. Also, again, there are reduced consumption from that front. And again, we look at the complication in terms of the geopolitical tension between Ukraine and Russia. Look at even what's going on between Iraq and Syria. All this again points to again that these countries will continue producing oil, and we are likely to see oil prices still coming down. And this is good news to oil importing countries like Kenya. And again, of late, to keep note that we've seen all this now filtering into the oil prices, the fuel prices, which were revised yesterday.
Fantastic conversation there with Maurice Odwor, who is the investment manager at Cyton, just helping us understand what's happening at the markets and, of course, predicting for us how the shilling is likely to perform in the coming days. Always a pleasure to have you on, Maurice. Well, let's now move on to another developing story where the fate of the multi-billion shilling Galana Kulalu food security project lies in the balance as members of parliament threatened to terminate the project, raising concerns over its viability. Speaking while on a tour of the project in Kwale County, the chairman of the Agricultural Committee, Aidan Noor, said that the yields on the different crops harvested so far are not convincing. So what could be the implications for Kenya if the project stalls?
The Galana Kulalu Ranch occupies nearly 1.75 million acres, comparable to the Gezira project in Sudan, which has irrigable area of 2 million acres. The ministry projects that Galana's 1 million acres under irrigation will provide adequate buffer against hunger should rains fail in the future. The project, being funded to the tune of 14 billion shillings, is set to lift Kenya's food security status by increasing land under irrigation by over 40%. The Galana Kulalu first crop was harvested 3 months ago under the 500-acre model farm. This placed hopes on the success of the project, which is still in trial phase.
So far, we've already put out an expression of interest, and we're very pleased that a lot of investors, including international and local investors, have shown interest to come to Galana, to come and invest here. And this is what we want. We want private sector to come in, let them do the business, not government. And that's why we have a new roadmap, and we have placed it before Parliament, and it is part of what we will be looking at.
But the project recently faced a setback after the Ministry of Agriculture slashed its budget by 50% to now 7.2 billion shillings, with its milling component being detached.
The demonstration farm is supposed to be producing a quick result with a minimal cost and then hand it over to the private sector. That was the intention. But going to milling, when we are closing millings and privatizing millings, even in other sectors like sugar, and we have privatized the Kenya Milling Corporation in Nakuru, that the government could not be able to run, then we find it is a waste.
Speaking while on a fact-finding mission at the Galana Ranch, members sitting in the Agriculture, Livestock and Cooperatives Committee expressed concerns over the project's feasibility. MPs have termed the Galana project a waste of taxpayers' funds, and that harvest from the second phase will be crucial in determining the future of the project.
The concept was convincing. It gives Kenyans a lot of hope. It is true that we are food insecure. It's not to everybody, every Kenyans in the world as a whole. But the unfortunate thing, the implementation pace of this project was not convincing, and that is, we suspended it last December before we went on recess.
The Jubilee administration has been pushing to revive its biggest project on food security ahead of next year's elections, with consumers feeling the pinch of high commodity prices.
We're here for the last leg, to give this project the last hope of life, whether it is really going to move on or whether we are going to forget about it as a whole.
According to Wamalwa, the completion of the project would eliminate the 50 billion shillings spent on food imports annually and keep retail prices of high-grade maize flour at 84 shillings per 2 kg packet. Abiagina, KTN Business Today.
Well, of course, the Galana Kulalo food project is dear to many Kenyans because it stands to lower the cost of a packet of maize flour by about 30%, something to ponder on. After weeks and months of backlashes in the Kenyan market, San Francisco online taxi firm Uber is seeking to hire managers to handle its Kenyan and East African operations amid stiff opposition from conventional taxi operators. Uber has advertised for senior positions including general manager, logistics manager, communications senior associate and public policy senior associate. The open technology firm penetrated the Kenyan market early mid-2015, bringing its global metered pricing to Nairobi. Customers are charged for every kilometer covered, unlike the convention Nairobi cabs, whose pricing is based on arbitrary negotiations with the drivers. Every Uber trip is automatically and openly priced, helping users budget for their travel expenses. Kenyan taxi operators have strongly opposed Uber's pricing model, which in some cases cuts by more than half the prices they have been charging commuters, especially on short trips. The taxi hailing app first advertised for the position of a country general manager 7 months ago. Of course, the Uber conversation is an endless one. Still keeping it with matters technology, Safaricom has committed to provide free internet to all primary schools in the government's Laptop for Schools project. This follows the announcement of the two consortiums set to implement the project early this month. Cabinet Secretary for ICT Joe Musheru says the consortium winners, Moi University and Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, will be implementing the proof of concept stage in 150 schools across counties starting the 22nd of February for 12 weeks. The authority added all the 22,000 public primary schools must be equipped with the devices within 2 years, with the first phase equipping 11,000 schools with the 600,000 devices from June 2016. The cost of the first phase of implementation is estimated at 17 billion shillings. The program aims to integrate the use of digital technologies.
Power connections to the schools, content creation, with the ultimate goal of a job and wealth creation for Kenyans. We want to build a knowledge society, and this is a step towards that direction for our children and future generations.
Well, from that developing story on the Laptop for Schools project, we want to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll be speaking to Deborah Muriuki on the issue around interest rates. She'll be talking to us a little bit more on what it means to take a loan and what are some of the factors customers need to consider when it comes to taking up a loan. Of course, CBK recently did publish the list of interest rates. We're going to have that interesting conversation in a short while. Don't go too far. Welcome back. You're watching KTN Business Today. My name is Abi Agina. Let's take a look at something that might interest you. Last week we did see the CBK announce some of the banks and what interest rates they are charging on different loans, and we want to update you on that particular matter because it's an interesting subject for most Kenyans who sort of rely on credit from banks for them to invest in their businesses and do all manner of things from credit. So which bank has some of the highest interest rates where it comes to affordability for customers, and what this means for you moving on into when you were making your investment decisions? What are also some of the issues that come to play when you're talking about interest rates? And we will be having shortly some of those banks to tell you a little bit more on what it means. But just to update you on that, we did see CBK publish close to 11 banks and what interest rates they are charging on their loans. Of course, the average rate for lending currently in the market is at about 24%. Of course, some banks are charging within that range. Others are charging way lower than that, something that customers did not know that they will now have that information and be able to make informed decisions when it comes to taking up loans. Of course, 90% of SMEs in the country rely on interest rates, actually rely on loans to finance their businesses, and that's why this issue is very important. And my director tells me have the various interest rates there on the screens. As you can see, this is what CBK did publish about the top tier banks. Top tier banks, these are some of the banks that have a turnover of $1 billion plus. And also, just to take you now up to speed, Barclays Bank was among the banks. If you can go back on the first slide on Barclays Bank, actually you can actually start with this, where Kenya Commercial Bank is having an interest rate of about 19.5%, and this is not the average rate because CBK places the average rate at about 22 to 24%. Equity Bank coming in there at 18.1%. Cooperative Bank at 16.6%. Interesting. Did you know that there's that wide variety? Well, you can now see. Let's move on to the next slide just to take a look at some of the other interest rates. And there we have it. Barclays Bank charging 19.6%. Standard Chartered Bank also around that range, 19.5%. These numbers are critical because a lot of issues have come up with the banking sector, where the Competition Authority of Kenya has actually launched an investigation to actually probe some of the banks because there are wide allegations of banks fixing interest rates to charge customers, and this technically is against the market fundamentals that dictate fair competition across the market. So that's just a quick look at some of those interest rates when it comes to various issues when you're talking about interest rates. And we want to get into an interesting conversation with a lady known as Deborah Muriuki, who is a banking analyst with Africa Alliance. And Deborah, want to get into this conversation. We've looked at some of these interest rates. Some of the banks are charging as high as 19.6%. And this particular move by CBK, what do you make of this initiative, Deborah, if you can hear me?
Definitely it's a welcome step to transparent pricing. I mean, this is information that borrowers did not have before. So now we have a comparative base. So it will empower you as a borrower to make an informative decision when you're going to apply for that credit. So, and it also will enhance competition amongst the banks, which definitely will filter down to benefiting the customer in the long run.